existence and not always have to be trying to think about ourselves through the lens of somebody else's life that they told us was an ideal life. And I just want us to like just forget them for a while and think about ourselves and be okay with that. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary of me and who I am and where I am and why I am.
And why I am. Okay.
I'm very happy to be here.
We are happy to have you with us.
Yeah, this is why I am. So
yay. People want to know why we're talking about pleasure. And we sort of settled on this theme very early in the year. I think maybe even last year, maybe in December. Just in thinking about a lot of the issues that we face, that women face, that Black women face, that Caribbean women face, and some of the issues that Bahamas has been looking at. And one of those issues is marital rape. And there's a pretty direct connection between marital rape and the issue of pleasure. When we're having this national conversation about marital rape and looking at the marital rape bill, there are a lot of conversations going on across the board, and a lot of it is focused on consent. And that makes sense. It makes sense because when we're talking about rape, we talk about consent.
Yeah.
But people have different definitions of consent. People have different understandings of what marriage means, particularly like religious marriage, Christian marriage in our context. And there's an argument about whether or not marriage means perpetual consent. And whether or not marriage means a woman pretty much becomes property of a man and just has to, what's the word? Submit all the time and in all ways. But the thing that's absent from that conversation is pleasure.
Yeah.
We don't talk about a woman's right to pleasure. Should sex be pleasurable for a woman as it is, as much as it is for a man? So that's one of the connections that we're making between pleasure, which might seem like a sort of like fanciful, feel-good topic, and a rather serious issue that we have to confront in very systemic ways and very practical ways as well. So that's just one of the connections. There are others that we'll talk about as we go on. But I think to get this conversation started and to get really grounded, we need to come up with some sort of definition of pleasure. Like, what is our understanding of pleasure? And I will ask Carla to jump in and tell us a little bit about pleasure. But those who are tuned in, you can just use the chat and say what your idea of pleasure is, or when you think about pleasure, what comes to mind.
Yeah. So when I think about pleasure, it's actually very simple for me. I think about enjoyment. I think about something that doesn't matter how you put your phone on do not disturb, a call is still gonna try to break through. Sorry about that. Yeah. When I think about pleasure, I think about something that I enjoy. And enjoy broadly. So something that pleasure can be something that I can get pleasure from something that makes me happy. I can get pleasure from something that makes me feel turned on. I can get pleasure from a nice meal that makes my belly feel good. I can get pleasure from a good conversation. The thing I'm using to measure whether I'm experiencing pleasure, bars, is if I am enjoying it. Am I enjoying something? Which it might feel oversimplified, but for me, it's just that. And I had to come to that because for me, pleasure used to feel very complicated in my brain, because just the word pleasure, it's not a word that people really use in day-to-day conversation. When you say pleasure, people are like, pleasure? You mean like a pleasure cruise? You mean like you're pleasuring yourself? You mean like, like all of these things that are out there. And then I had to really ask myself, okay, Carla, if you got serious about bringing more pleasure into your life, what would that look like? And for me, it's joy. It's things that I enjoy, things that add a positive value to my life through that vehicle of joy. So that's it for me. But what is it for you?
Yeah, what is it for everybody else? Y'all still warming up or what? One of the things, Kelly says, when I think about pleasure, I think about things that are pleasant, things that feel good to the body, mind, and spirit. I like that. Yeah. The
Yeah.
things that feel good.
Yeah,
That's
like
simple,
that one
right? What feels good to you? What is enjoyable?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think about
And
sexual pleasure automatically.
it's kind of the natural, when we think about pleasure, usually we think about sex. I feel that's usually where we find that term being used. We call it other things elsewhere, but when it comes down to sex, we'll use the word pleasure. And I think it's maybe sets some of us at odds or complicates the word for us, especially those of us who might have baggage around sex and may not want things that are sexual popping up in other areas of our lives because it's uncomfortable. Um, the thing that you raised about marital rape and that particular discussion, I don't know if we think of marriage as a place that's supposed to be pleasurable for women. I don't know if we think of marital sex as something that's supposed to be pleasurable for women. I think once you become a wife, there's an expectation that you're supposed to become very functional. You become a mother, you become a homemaker, you become all of these things that are more about stability and nurturing and giving to other people. But I don't think we necessarily think of married women as automatically the type of people who enjoy pleasure. So, sex for a married woman is not the same as sex for a single woman. It's a different entity entirely. I think it really muddies the water for us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
One
trying
of
to
the things
sneakily
that
sign into the chat elsewhere. Sorry, go ahead.
every time I think about pleasure, just the word, I go
Yeah.
back to this memory of like being a child, calling my dad at work. He worked at a hotel, and obviously having like the voice of a child. Good afternoon, may I be transferred to? And the operator saying, "My pleasure." And I just think
What's
about
it?
that in the context of like tourism and the way that we have to perform.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's not even servitude, but this like constant benevolence and happiness within our jobs and our roles, people who are participating in a paradise that's created for other people. And just thinking about that operator, I thought about the operator as one person. Obviously, it was multiple people, talking to different operators all the time, but they would always say, my pleasure, my pleasure, my pleasure, sort of like a robot. And it came to mind because, like I was saying, we talk about pleasure, people automatically go to sexual pleasure. But here's the operator at a hotel saying that to do her job, to connect.
It's my pleasure to transfer you.
Yeah.
My pleasure. And it really probably was not pleasurable for her at all, being there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Kelly says, you bring up the point that pleasure isn't something we only enjoy, but it's something we give.
Yeah. When I started thinking about this conversation on pleasure, and like I started reading around pleasure activism, one of the things that stood out for me is that it's possible for us to get pleasure from things that perhaps people don't associate with being pleasurable. Some people get pleasure from service. Some people get pleasure from, organization. Some people get pleasure from discipline. Some people get pleasure from seeing something to completion. Some people get pleasure from lots of different things that we just didn't necessarily associate with it. And so I think like that idea that pleasure can come from something that you give is also really significant. For me, when I think about pleasure, I also think about the flip side of pleasure, which is longing. And I think there's a way that we can be very uncomfortable with the idea of longing. We can become very uncomfortable with the idea of wanting something, the idea of needing something, the idea of desiring something, especially when, you, as a woman, there's an idea that you don't want to be desperate. When a man wants something, he wants something. When a woman wants something, she's thirsty. When a woman wants something, she's desperate. Yeah. And so there's a way you're not supposed to want. And we're actually coached into not wanting. I mean, even the thing when we are kids, you go to somebody's house and you're hungry, but you must tell them you're not hungry. You don't need these people to know that you're hungry because you have food at home, and you don't want your parents to be misrepresented as though they're not feeding you when it's like, I'm hungry. Like, I am hungry. I cannot help the fact that I'm hungry. I'm not doing it to spite you. I'm hungry because I've run out of food. And so there's a lot of ways that we are coached out of wanting things. Don't want, don't long, don't need, don't desire, be satisfied, be satisfied, be satisfied with what you have. And I think admitting I am not satisfied feels disruptive, and it feels like I'm being too much. And so we do without pleasure, because in order to go towards pleasure, you have to admit that you want. And I think that longing is very useful because it's a GPS that will show you where there is a space for more pleasure in your life. But you kind of have to open yourself up and be vulnerable enough to admit that you want something in order for you to get it. But I think that we're averse to it. And especially I feel Black people and definitely women are coached away from that. So one of the questions that I ask myself, and like I ask myself with a very hard emphasis on the last part of it, is what do you want? You know, which is a very different person from, so what do you want? No, what do you want? Like, what's the thing you want? What's the thing that when you think about it, you really feel, oh God, I wish I could have that. Some of us shy away from that because it's like, it's somebody else's partner. And then it's awkward because then you're like, oh Jesus, I wish I didn't want that. Woo, you know, but like, what do you want? You know, I want ice cream. So then go and have the ice cream. What do you want? I want to quit this job. Okay, so go and do that. What do you want? I just want somebody to touch me, especially in COVID-19, especially under the lockdown. I just want somebody to touch me. I feel like that's the universal thing that many people are going through right now. Just like, please, could somebody come over and just put their hand on me for just a little while, just long enough for me to register that you're here. What do you want? But to admit that you want it feels like admitting that you lack. To admit that you want, it feels like I'm not enough on my own. Admitting that you want feels like it's, you know, being thirsty in a world where everybody's supposed to be quenched. And so we just don't do it. And I wish that more of us could just look ourselves in the face and say, I want that. It doesn't mean that I'm going to get it, but I feel something inside of me that's yearning for something that I don't have now. And there is pleasure there for me, and I want to go towards it. Yeah, it feels very vulnerable. As I see Kelly saying that, it feels vulnerable to admit it. And we really are coached out of vulnerability, because vulnerability doesn't go alongside survival mode. And a lot of us as Caribbean people, we are in survival mode at all times. And even when our families progress beyond the point where we have to be in survival mode because some of those basic needs are met, those ways of being that are premised on survival are still there. So there's no space for vulnerability. And so we don't know what we want because we can't admit that we want. You know, even in the quiet of our houses by ourselves, we still struggle to do it. And I think like that's one of the revolutionary things about putting pleasure at the center of how you engage the world, or even just moving it a little bit in from the margin, is it forces you to do that work, to become vulnerable, so you can move into a deeper relationship with yourself, so that you can actually meet more of your needs because you're willing to admit that you have them, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, that was a mouthful. But yeah, not wanting to engage, longing. But what I put this quote in the chat because I didn't want to forget it. When you said that longing is a GPS that will show you where there is space for more pleasure in your life. To me, that's a statement of the importance of longing and being able to recognize that feeling, but understanding that it doesn't mean lack, right? It doesn't mean that you're completely without stuff, you know? Desperate. But it is a vulnerability, like Kelly was saying in the chat. And on the other, I guess not on the other side of that, but another way that functions, and you had talked about this when we spoke in preparation for this, is about the way that we reject or we forget about past pleasure, things that we used to enjoy, because they don't feel accessible to us anymore, because somebody has taken away the permission to engage in that thing. So, I mean, for people who are joining us, you can probably think of something that you used to like, right? That you don't do anymore. And you might have convinced yourself that you don't like it anymore, right? But is it that you don't like it anymore? Is it that something made it not fun anymore? And if that's the case, how do you work yourself out of that and back to your own pleasure?
How do you reclaim it? I'd love to hear from folks around that, about what are the things that you used to enjoy that you gave up on. I find, especially as we become adults, there are so many things that we just give up on because we're like, oh, it's not age appropriate anymore. It's not appropriate for someone of my age to do that. But you love this thing for 19 years and you suddenly don't love it anymore? How do you suddenly just not love it anymore? You know? So I see a hand. Okay.
Kadisha, go for it.
Hey everyone. I hope my computer doesn't give too much feedback noise, but I like that. I like what she just said, like Carla at the end. She was talking about probably like being maybe too old and feeling like you're too old to enjoy something. So just to kind of put this in a context, like I'm a woman with a disability. And so but I wasn't born with a disability. And so that's the unique thing I think about my experience, is that I was old enough to actually be able to understand the difference of life before and life after, you know, and there are a lot of differences, right? So like I used to play soccer. I was just like very active. I literally could walk. So you could imagine like there's a major difference in a lot of different areas. And for me, like it's a barrier thing, right? So living in the Bahamas, like a lot of the things that used to give me pleasure, going to the beach, you know, like a lot of those things instantly become inaccessible. So apart from that, let's say I do want to engage in sports, right? Like there's also like this stigma. Like I feel like people, and I really don't know a whole lot about Paralympics, so let me just preface it by saying that, but I do feel from my view that persons that even want to engage where it's not a norm, like it is kind of essentialized, or like, you know, it's like this whole, like it becomes a thing, like it just becomes like a thing, and then you feel like you're the spectacle. And even as it relates to sex, right? So like people automatically assume because you have a disability, or because they can visibly see that you have a disability, mine being that I use a wheelchair, you suddenly don't enjoy things like that anymore, right? Like, and then this becomes a question of like, what can you feel? And then it's like you're being challenged, you know what I mean? Your womanhood is challenged. Like, anyway, let me just open up the floor. That's all I can say for now.
I feel like you did open up the floor a lot with that.
I think it's such an important contribution, Kadisha. Thank you for sharing, because there are certain groups of people who are invisible or made to feel invisible, and who we don't often think about unless you happen to encounter someone, or someone you know ends up in the same position, and then you suddenly become hyper aware of some of the things that people are facing. And a lot of times, if you don't have people in the space with you to talk about them, you don't get to think about them. And like you said, I had never thought about it until I think I was in a class a while ago, when someone was saying that people think of people with disabilities as sexless. And that, you know, and I guess that means that there's no desire either, right? I don't know how you deal. I don't know how you deal with that. I don't know how much you want to share, Kadisha, about like navigating pleasure, desire, or just the way that people engage based on their own assumptions and a lack of knowledge.
Hello?
Pleasure.
I'm sorry, did someone else want to go?
I think it might have been an accident. I think it was an accidental unmuting.
Good evening, everyone.
Oh. Hello.
I would like to make my
Good
contribution.
evening.
I would like to make my contribution heard since I've
Please
had my
do.
own experience. And I love sharing my experiences at forums like these. I was in hospital, and this is a great experience that I can share. And on discharge, it was amazing that the social worker came in and she was listing everything that I should and shouldn't do. And strange enough, she skipped having sex. Oh, dear her. She skipped having sex because of my age. And I want to make it known that you guys are touching on a very important topic. And I love the aspect of pleasure because people need to understand pleasure comes in different forms, fashion, with no colors attached. We are the persons who put the system in place to add to age and probably gender to make people feel, oh, it's up with you. You don't have to do this. You have already given birth to 3 kids, 2 kids, no kids. But the point I want to share with you tonight, we must be mindful of people and their pleasures. For me, age have no barrier to pleasure. Disabilities have no barrier to pleasure. It's all in the mind, and I'm being very honest about it. I surround myself with a lot of younger persons because I find that to be one of my major pleasures in life. It helps me to like feel better about my age, my personality, because I'm very bubbly. So going around older folks or even some younger women than myself, I feel very much out of place because conversation like this, they're not comfortable with. And I know I'm very comfortable. And even though I'm sick in bed, it really stimulated a part of my pleasure, which is to talk about how I feel about women being discriminated against. And if it's a 70, 80-year-old guy, we cheer them on. So what is so different about a 60, 70-year-old woman who feels she want to have sex, who feels she still want to go to the beach, who still feels she want to wear a throw and whatever. So this is a very sensitive conversation, and I must compliment you guys. My name is Jennifer Bisnott. I'm the mother of Tiriana. I want to tell you that. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jen. And I think those are such important points because it links right directly with what Kadisha is saying, right? Like people decide who gets to have particular kinds of pleasure, who gets to have access to sexual pleasure. And that person who is reading off to you what is safe and what isn't safe for you to do just decided that you didn't need to know anything about sex because that doesn't apply to you. And I see, Carla, you look like you just want to jump in. Please do it.
No, because I want to fight the person who did that. What people do that, they make a decision, they look at you and they make a full decision about your life. And there's certain people who we think deserve pleasure, or certain people who we think are at a place in their life where pleasure is something that should be important to them. And there are other people who we feel, oh, you should have other things to think about, or oh, that makes me uncomfortable, the idea that you would be exploring that type of pleasure. And it really, we were very disconnected from ourselves. And then we project that to other people. We assume that other people should be disconnected in the same way. And it burned me. It really burns me that we, as she said, we see a 70-year-old man walking down the road with, you know, a 30-year-old, 20-year-old, 40-year-old, and people are like, oh, that's right, keep it pimping, yes, young, he's fresh. And a woman do it, and people are like, you need to powder your chest and go to bed. You need to put on your duster and go and lie down. Why are you out here doing this? And the span, the length of time that women are allowed to enjoy pleasure is so short. The number of days in the month that women are allowed to enjoy pleasure is so limited that by the time you check it out, there's like 1 week per month for like maybe 25 years of your life where you are allowed to enjoy pleasure without people judging you. And then after that, it done. And we buy into it. And that's actually the thing. We buy into it. We actually believe it. And then we start making our choices based on these things that people have told us, to the point that for us to go after pleasure feels revolutionary, when in reality, there is nothing more mundane than pleasure. One of the first things children learn is how to pleasure themselves, right? They soothe themselves by pleasuring themselves. It's one of the earliest things we learn, but then, you know, we're coached away from it afterwards. I want to fight somebody. Somebody has a question. I want to
go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to just add, like, I think what the other, like, two previous people mentioned is like very important. And I wanted to say that because I think that it shows how these like systems like ageism and ability are interconnected, and how like other systems of oppression are interconnected as well. And I think that it shows that just basically how society strips the sexuality of people who they don't consider to be productive, like people who have lived longer, especially women, and like people with disabilities. And I also wanted to add into those groups queer people, because they're also kind of considered like unproductive because they can't like procreate and add to like the labor force. So I just think like, I just wanted to say like all of those people and more are like also considered like unproductive because of that.
Yeah, lots of ideas about the purpose of sex and separating it from the most obvious thing and the thing that hopefully everyone would experience when they have sex, which is pleasure. Every time you have sex, you don't produce a child.
Yeah. But we're very committed to sex for making a baby. It's the reason why, you know, oral sex is still taboo for one set of people and anal sex is taboo for another set of people, because, and it comes from the plantation, right? If it's sex that's not making a baby, it's not beneficial to the plantation owner. You can't be doing that for fun. And we don't think about why it is that we carry these things. I mean, it comes back down to the type of body we think of as a valuable body as well. We think of a young, able body as being valuable and therefore worthy of pleasure. And so many of us are distant from things that bring us pleasure, in particular sexual pleasure, because of our discomfort with our body. Like, and you can think about this if you have a body that's not normative, you know, for a fat body, or, you know, I mean, just living inside of a female body or having a Black body. The number of things that people shy away from because they're afraid that they smell, or they're afraid that people will see them doing something that they are not good at automatically, or they're afraid that they will sweat, or they're afraid that people will say something about them. And I can speak from my experience. As a fat person, I shy away from things, even though I'll enjoy them. If I think they're going to make me sweat, I shy away from them, because when you're fat and you sweat, it's like a failure. It's not just a normal body doing what normal bodies do. When fat people sweat, it's kind of like, well, look at you just struggling to life because you're fat. You allowed your body to get so fat that now you can't even walk without sweating, you know? And I think that there are a lot of fat people who will tell you that I don't want to be seen doing anything physically demanding because people will judge me. I know so many people who are hesitant to share their bodies in sex because of the issue of smell. How do I smell? Well, you smell like a human. What do you think you're supposed to smell like? You know? And it's all of these strong reservations that we build up over time because we have shame about our bodies and what our bodies are like. And so, like, one of the questions that I ask myself is, what's the thing that you would do if you weren't ashamed of your body? You know, if you weren't ashamed of your body. And the first time I said that to myself, I was like, you're not ashamed of your body. You love your body. Lizzo is a bad bitch. And then I had to calm all the way down and be like, sit down, sis. Like, almost all of us have shame about our bodies. And it's a question that I'd love to hear, you know, people can answer. Like, what's the thing that you would do if you weren't ashamed of your body? And sometimes it's as simple as, I would go for a hike. I would join one of those crews of people who goes biking. There's this one person who's been loitering in my DMs, and I would give them some with a mask, you know, because COVID-19. You know, I would wear a swimsuit because I wasn't worried about hyperpigmentation on my inner thigh and under my arm. I would put on some lingerie because I wouldn't have worry that people were like, oh no, you have a disability and you're wearing sexy underwear. You know, why would you wear that? Who you wearing it for? What's the thing that you would do if you weren't ashamed of your body? And this might be one of those where people will like whisper the answer to themselves instead of on you.
We'll see if anybody wants to share in the chat. We'll be watching the chat, you all, just in case you feel like you might want to share.
Kadisha said I'd post more on social media, probably.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You show more of yourself.
Yeah. You can tell when we're ill at ease with our bodies because our social media becomes face photos. You know, you can definitely tell when I'm feeling chubby because it's just face. There's nobody. I have nobody. It's just head.
But isn't it interesting how social media allows you to curate your body in that way? You can not post your face. You could post just your face. You could post just your legs. Like sometimes you like, my legs are legging today. And you go these legs, right? And I think like that's a form of pleasure too, is just like checking yourself out. Like, I'm not gonna lie, throughout the I've always spent a lot of time at home because I have always, well, not always, but for years I've worked from home. Yeah. And I don't wear a ton of clothes in the house, which is that's a very moderate statement. But you know, spending extra time at home and walking around, like, I'm not a mirror person. I don't spend time in the mirror at all. But there's a mirror in my hallway, and I would catch myself sort of like catching myself in the mirror and being like, okay, girl, you know, and sort of like letting myself lean into it, even as I watched my body change. Like, my legs are definitely bigger. You know, things are shifting, things are changing. Part of that is, you know, I don't know if people gaining like a quarantine 15, part of that is probably aging, hormones, whatever. But I'm sort of watching myself go through it and not being mad at it and just sort of appreciating it. And part of it is, it's part of my pleasure practice, is to sort of just appreciate myself where I am and how I am, because nobody else is going to do that for me and no one else is going to help me. And, you know, people do the opposite. You know, people see you after a long time and be like, oh, you got a little pot belly now. And it's like, thank you very much for noticing and saying it out loud in front of all of these people. You muted, Carla.
Sorry, Jamaicans would be like, oh, you fat like cut post. And I was like, if I were to tell you that you have grown uglier with age, I would be unkind. But you are allowed to just say whatever you have to say about my body. Okay, noted. Yeah, and so even that, for us to admit, well, actually, I like looking at myself. There's a way that people are like, oh, you're narcissistic, you're conceited. Why should I hate looking at myself? I live with myself every day. Why should the act of looking at myself not bring me pleasure? Should I have installed sadness into my life by hating the way that I show up? You know, and there are other things that people get pleasure from. And we were discussing this, like, some people really love their hair. They love it. And they love when people give them compliments on their hair. It gives them pleasure. But to actually admit to themselves I am going out and I am going to take the best care of my hair possible because it is a site of pleasure for me. People would tell them that they're conceited and that vanity goes before a fall and all of these other things that we say to people. And so again, we limit people from pleasure because, oh, you're attention seeking, oh, you're too full of yourself. Why should I have emptied myself of myself? That actually makes no sense. And so like, what is actually your favorite part of your body? Like, what is the part of your body that you know is popping? Or even if you don't think it's popping, you like it for some reason. What can you do with that part of your body to increase the pleasure that you get from it? Maybe it's about changing your hair color. Maybe it's about ensuring that you're using the oils that are going to give the skin that particular glow. Maybe you need to do some squats because your booty could be a little bit bigger. Like, what is the thing on your body that you enjoy? And how can you increase the pleasure from it? And how can you allow yourself to be okay with enjoying being yourself? It's okay to enjoy being yourself. It's okay to enjoy looking the way you do. It's okay to enjoy the way your mind works. It's okay to get pleasure, to like listen to yourself, think something through and go, I really enjoyed that process. And on top of it, I am very smart and I enjoy that about myself without thinking I need to hold back, because if I enjoy things too much, then I'll stop being a productive member of society. And I will just get so caught up in pleasure that I will like fall into a pleasure vortex, never to be heard from again. There's
Oh no, not the pleasure vortex.
not the pleasure vortex. No, I'm enjoying my life too much. And it doesn't. So like, what's the part of your body that you really enjoy? What's the part of your body that maybe gets you a little bit of attention? And when the attention isn't creepy, you like getting that bit of attention. And what is the shift that you'd have to make in your mind to allow yourself to be okay with the fact that you like that attention? Because I think stepping into pleasure takes a mindset shift for a lot of us.
Yeah.
Why cat? Sorry, my cat tried
you
to
have a wild
destroy.
cat?
No, my cat tried to destroy my whole little setup right here.
Oh.
Disrespect. Yes, sorry.
Kadisha, you had your hand up. Did you still want to say something?
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to touch on what Carla was saying about like, should she install?
After you. Oh, sorry. Just after you, we'll go to Kay. I see your hand too, Kay. I'll just go back to back.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. But so yeah, like I think, like I was telling y'all, like my injury happened when I was 17. So, I was able to like interpret the world, and so a lot of people, I think, felt like, well, for one, like when people see you get injured, like I think the natural response is you must heal, right? And so healing is like, that's a different concept for different people. Like they think that should look a certain way. But in the process of healing, I feel like I have felt like people don't expect me to live my life and enjoy my life. It's almost like I've literally actually dated someone that, and I've heard this in different forms from different people, but allude to, me actually like looking nice or whatever, and referring to that as, oh, you love this chair, man, you in your crown, you sitting on your throne. Like, what? Like, do you really think I would choose this? Like, why would you? Anyway, but yeah, and so I think to touch on, Carla, you saying the thing about should you have installed unhappiness or sadness, whatever in your life, like, I think people don't like when they see people living their life, whatever that looks like for them. Because, and I say the thing I say about social media, not because I don't like my life, but because there is a stereotype, so to speak, of what an enjoyable life looks like right now on social media. And I think anything that does not really fit that, especially as it relates to body types, I think is not really as much celebrated, right? It is still received a little bit as taboo. People still cringe a little bit if you don't have like flat stomach, big ass, like, it's like, why you even posting this little booty? You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. Like, I feel like there's that, but yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Kay, do you want to jump in here?
Yes. I can just say that just in terms of a reflection on how important image is to self-esteem and pleasure in oneself appears to be at an all-time high in global culture. And of course, social media plays such a profound role in that, in making the visual and the image, especially your body image, so very important to your self-esteem. So I see that investment growing. I also can observe that I think there's less investment in developing yourself in other ways. I think women, of course, are especially prone to that because so much value is placed on the bodies of women and how it looks. And that's in some ways a burden that many women bear and have to deal with or confront in terms of valuing themselves and finding pleasure, if you in themselves. I think also that if we were to see ourselves as more than an image, if we were to develop ourselves, find various ways in which to feel enjoyment and fulfillment, that would go a far way to feeling affirmed across our life history. And I do think that that is a challenge for many because of what is valued, especially for women. So I just want to interject that because the question of pleasure is so vast. There's so many aspects to it. You could take one aspect and just talk about it for a whole session.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you make that connection between where we find pleasure or our sources of pleasure and what we value. And yeah, for a lot of people, it's image, it's body. I think for a lot of people, it's achievement, which can also be, could get to be a bit much, right? For some people, it's a thrill or like that adrenaline rush. There's so many ways that people experience pleasure. I think we were talking a little bit earlier about forgetting or feeling too grown up for certain kinds of pleasure. And I think that's really common. We sort of associate certain things with childhood, like even Christmas, people say, oh, Christmas is for children. Like if you don't like Christmas, cool. If you're not into gifts and stuff, cool. But to say it's for children, it's sort of like you think that you can outgrow joy. I think there's something interesting there to investigate for oneself.
Yeah.
I think that's enchantment.
You think that's?
I think when people say that, they're really talking about enchantment. I think your experience of Christmas when you're 5 or 10 is quite different from when you're 30.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you don't get enjoyment from it, but quite often you'll find that parents, in particular, will find enjoyment through the appreciation or the enchantment of the child. Or I mean, they still enjoy the beauty of a tree and the beauty of gift giving and so on, but the experience is different. So when someone says Christmas is for children, one would have to think about what do they mean by that, rather than presuming that they mean that there's no pleasure in it.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I have a comment I'd like to share.
Okay, your sound is a little low though.
Okay, wait, is that better?
A little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So,
it's good now.
okay, yeah. Like living under capitalism makes pleasure is very susceptible to being commodified under capitalism, right? Whether it's through like a monetary value or this value of likes or validation on social media. And like I just found that with myself, going back to the question about something that you take pleasure in, or you used to take pleasure in. Like when I was a child, I loved painting, drawing, that sort of stuff. And I only recently returned to it. But even when I did, it was kind of like, oh, well, can I get money from this? Because if I could get some additional income, that's what I can do. Because the way my bills set up, the way capitalism set up, I need to be trying to get money, 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 And so it's like this idea that like even something that I enjoy, thinking about how I could capitalize it, I think has made it very difficult to distinguish pleasure from personal economic activity, or whatever you want to call it, and I think with COVID, people have realized that there are free things that you can do that bring you pleasure, like going for a walk. But like before that, we took it for granted because we had to walk to get to point A, point B. Like, what was the purpose? And I find like the same thing on social media. Like a lot of people are competing to project a life that's pleasurable, maybe at a level that's higher than yours, right? Like, oh, I took this trip and my trip required a 6-hour flight and your trip only required a 20-minute drive. Check me out. Like, doing my, you know what I mean? Yeah, so I just wanted to share that because those are some of my thoughts as we're talking.
You're muted, Carla.
No, I'm just saying the facts of it, the facts of it, the facts. It's just this endless competition. And like that whole thing, like if I can't make money from it, then there's no point in exploring it. And if I can do something, then I should try to turn it into a money-making entity, which for a lot of us actually like kills the pleasure. There are lots of folks who they have things that they're really passionate about and they're really good at. And the moment they turn it into a job, it's not enjoyable for them anymore because now it's mixed in with all of this baggage that we have associated with employment and with jobs. And so the pleasure of doing something for doing its sake, a lot of times we miss that. And I love that thing about either it has to make money for you or it has to get likes for you, right? So it has to look good on IG. I'm not going to take singing classes because it might be years before I can take that voice on the road. And I can't put that croaking on IG because nobody going to feel I sound like Celine Dion and be like, thumbs up, sis, slay. Nobody's going to tell me to slay. So I'm not doing that. And I can't get any money from that. And yeah, I like to draw, but my stuff look like a pepperoni pizza. And I don't, it's giving very much money, but I don't know what to do with that. And so I'm not going to share with people that I like to paint. And I feel like that whole capitalist project, and it's like it's a colonial project as well. There's a way that capitalism has interacted with pleasure in a way that is really harmful. And I think colonialism as well, because there are a set of people that we think should have pleasurable lives, and they shouldn't have to overwork or stress or overextend to have pleasurable lives. When we see them laying down on the beach or we see them posting from Aspen, we're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then there's another set of people who we don't think should have those types of pleasurable experiences, or if they do, it should be a momentary break from a life that is otherwise a drudge and a burden, you know. So there's a way that pleasure has a color associated with it, pleasure has a class standing associated with it, pleasure has a geographic location associated with it, especially from those of us who live in the part of the world where people come to have their pleasurable vacations, but we might go weeks without going to the beach because we're too busy working, you know. And I feel like all of these things are, you know, we have to factor them into the conversation about pleasure, because it's very mixed. It's very mixed.
We have a comment here from Jennifer saying, I was just thinking about how, as a recent graduate who is currently unemployed, I have felt so guilty about not being productive and rediscovering old hobbies and things that make me happy because of the conditions of capitalism.
Yeah. We have big guilt around pleasure.
For some reason,
and non-productivity.
Like, by its very definition, we should get it, but we still don't, right? Like, we're still thinking that it's supposed to produce something. Even in the way that people start businesses, I think a lot of people who don't even want to run businesses start them because they're good at something.
Yeah.
They feel like they have to turn it into money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And on the other side of that, which we talked about earlier, Carla, was the idea that you have to earn pleasure.
Yes.
It must.
You have to put yourself through. Yeah, you have to put yourself through some stuff, and then you can get a little bit of pleasure. Or you must be punished for pleasure too, you know, because you have your cheat day. So you have your diet, and then the day when you eat the things that you want to eat, it's your cheat day. Or if you're eating cheesecake now, you have to be counting the calories in your head and deciding how much walking you're gonna have to do and how much running you're gonna have to do to get rid of this cheesecake. And so it's I think you said it's very transactional. Like, if I get pleasure, I have to give something in return. I have to sacrifice something in return. Like, we've completely misunderstood this idea of balance. You know, it's like, oh, something good happened. Okay, something bad has to happen now, just to keep it fair. Just to keep it fair. I need
and
something bad to pop up.
I'm gonna make the bad thing happen for myself.
Yeah, I'm gonna make sure, because I wanna make sure that I'm doing justice to the universal plan to keep things in balance. If you don't sit down and just enjoy this thing that's happening and stop this, you know, just stop this right now, right? Oh, I see. Nadine's hand is up. Oh, there's two hands up now.
Hi. So it's hi, ma'am. I actually thought about a story, so kind of segueing-ish, but when did you learn that pleasure wasn't for you, right? And I actually have like a story. So I remember I was in foreign with my mother, and we had gone away, and we had money, you know, she got money to do shopping and everything like that. And I wanted a PlayStation. No reason. So it's the last day we're there 2 weeks. There this last day, and she walked out the whole of New York trying to find a PlayStation for cheap. Now the PlayStation costs $100. They've not been sell it for nothing but $100. Like, it's $100. That's how it works. But my mother wanted to ball down the price, could not. And I remember she stopped me and she said to me, "Okay, we have to go home. This is the cost of immigration, for pay for duty upon everything. This is what it's gonna cost." We just walked through. She walked me through the whole thing. This is how much it's gonna cost to go home. This is how much the taxi gonna cost to go to airport. And like, I knew the entire budget. This is how much it cost her, how much money she got when she was here. This is how much money she done spend. Am I sure? And she stopped and she asked me, "Are you sure that you need or want this PlayStation?" And my answer was no. And I realized that that is my entire life. I can sit down and budget, but at some point, if it is not a need, I don't know how to get the thing for myself. I am sitting down and going, do I need it? Am I going to die without it? Obviously, it is not going to get bought. And it is a very weird situation to be in a space where you're not in basic survival mode anymore, and then be faced with things that you could get and not be able to get the things because you're like, but I don't need the thing, right? I don't need it. Wanting things, like that is when wanting things, I think, just died for me. And it's so weird because my therapist is like, yo, what do you want? And I'm like, mom, I want to fight you right now because I don't know. I cannot. I feel very uncomfortable with this whole you want thing. I don't want anything. Please stop trying to stress me out. So I've been working through that recently. So I said that story to somebody last night. So I thought I'd just share.
That's a great story. Like, that's a great question. At what age did you learn that pleasure is not for you? I feel like there's a lot of us who go through a process and like learn that. I don't know if anybody else has anything to say because I would just leave space. But that's an amazing story. And also I feel like a lot of us can trace back to a time when we're like, yep, no, we're gonna get needs met. It's not about this wanting thing at all. But I see another hand up, so I'll leave space.
Okay, did you have a comment? You could unmute.
All right. Yes, I was reflecting on anxiety about maintaining one's class position under capitalism, and why it is that there is this impulse to monetize quote unquote hobbies or what you do well. And I think that this anxiety that exists and that is perpetuated by a class society in which you have to work, and so much of your life is caught up with work and buying the necessities of life. And those necessities will vary depending on class. So this question of survival mode is not just about people who are poor, but people who are even middle class. It's about how to maintain that class position, how to reproduce it. And when you live in a capitalist society, so much of your existence is mediated by money and finances, and that becomes part and parcel of pleasure. It's created and constituted in that way. There are many individuals, on the other hand, who would gain extra enjoyment if they can monetize an activity or a hobby of some sort. So it's very complex in terms of how people see pleasure and what is pleasurable to them.
Yeah. I hadn't actually thought about that. So I'm really grateful that you shared that about survival mode and how even people who have class standing can remain in survival mode because they have to keep that class position. And it's true. I mean, I think for a lot of people, one of the most terrifying things could be that they should ever slip down the class ladder, right? Or your family should start out as being the wealthy family in a community, and then you're not anymore. And what is your sense of self and where do you belong after that? I think there's a lot of people who force themselves to take pleasure from the pursuit of money, especially because it's validated right now. Especially, everybody's the rise and grind, and I'll sleep when I'm dead, and always hustling. We're hustling 24 hours a day. I'm always selling something. If you come to my car with me right now, I have pencils that I can sell you. I am always selling. And I think there's a lot of us who are trying to tweak our value systems and trying to tweak how we experience joy to just it's money. And I see it even in the transition in rap music, where the conversations it's moved from I'm going to give you things, even I'm going to give you expensive things. So I'm just going to give you cash. Like I'm just going to give you raw cash. And that's the best way that I can show I love you. And there's nothing wrong with giving your partner raw cash. There's nothing wrong. Do it if you want to. However, I see that, in the way that capitalism marches on, it's really gotten to a point where I don't even need you to think about a gift for me. Just give me the money. And that's the way that you can most accurately depict to me that you care for me. And I think a lot of us have to wake up every day and convince ourselves that we really love the pursuit of money. We get great joy from the pursuit of money to continue to seek out pleasure in the ways that are okay in a capitalist society. And it's a lot of work. Yeah. There's another comment here.
Celeste, did you want to unmute? I know you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, sure, I can. Do you want me to talk about the comment?
Whatever you wanted to say.
Oh, I was gonna talk about something that Carla said earlier, but I can't remember now. But I guess I could say a little bit about my comment. So I was just like thinking, like, I'm on TikTok a lot. I don't know if that's something to be embarrassed of or not, but but there's like just kind of a lot of discussions about like, or little like TikToks about like eldest daughters, and sometimes the ways that they take on like that maternal role, or sometimes therapist role to their parents or to their siblings, and just kind of take on the role of raising both their siblings or even their parents to a certain extent. And Carla mentioned earlier about like at what age do we have to let go of pleasure, and that kind of made me think that like eldest daughters often let go of like pleasure very early to take on that maternal role to their siblings and to their parents sometimes.
Can I piggyback on that? Yeah, I think I sort of went through the same thing. I'm like one of three, not the eldest, but I have a twin, so we're the same age, and then my younger sister. And I think being like to Nadine's point, when you're very aware of the needs, you learn very quickly to sacrifice your wants, because in your mind it doesn't fit into the budget, or it doesn't fit into the expectations and plans for the family. So like I remember one summer my sister wanted to go on a trip, and I wanted to go too, but I didn't think my mom could afford to pay for us both to go, so I didn't say anything. And it wasn't until my mom asked me after the fact, she was like, well, you sure you don't want to go? And I was like, I mean, I do, but I just figured like I'd let her go instead. And she was like, no, you can go too. But that was just me making that assumption in that mindset of like, oh, well, I have other siblings and I know my parents' situation and yeah, blah, blah, blah.
Carla, you muted.
Just saying various things like, yes, Papa Jesus, the testimony, it feels sanctified. No, yeah, I mean, we learn really early that the contribution that we can make to our whole household economy is to withdraw our pleasure from what it is that they have to deal with and figure through on a daily basis. Like, I can't add anything necessarily tangible, but I can subtract my needs. And that's the way that I can make everything easier. And then we just continue doing that for the rest of our lives. Yeah, I see somebody else I think is ready to talk.
Yeah, we have a comment. This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. As a parent, of course, you prioritize your child, but how much are we allowed to enjoy the things that bring us pleasure? How do we balance pleasure and responsibilities? And then right on the back of that, Nadine says, how do we juggle our responsibilities with our wants? So everybody's kind of thinking along the same lines. And there is an interesting way that we learn to deny ourselves what we want, or to even forget about wants completely, because our read of the situation is that there's scarcity, there's not enough to go around, so I will be the one to not have.
And if you ask most of us what are the things that make us happy, we will tell you things that don't cost anything. You know, if you ask what makes you happy, and it'd be like, oh, I love being out in nature, or I love singing, or I love listening to music, or we will tell you things that don't cost anything, but we still think it's too much to do them, because we think the time that it's going to take to do them costs too much. The time could be spent elsewhere. We think the energy costs too much. The energy could be spent elsewhere. And if it's something that we want to do with another person, we think asking for that person's attention costs too much. They could better spend their attention elsewhere. So there is this smalling up that we do of ourselves and our needs. And so we just don't ask for, and we don't expect. And we are pleasantly surprised, and we're grateful if it is that, you know, nice things should happen and we should engage in pleasure. But we don't think of it as a right. We don't think of pleasure as a right for people like us. And then, as many of us are raised in a model of sacrificial love, love is sacrifice. I know that my mother loved me by how much she sacrificed for me, because she gave up her education for me, because she gave up her sleep for me, because, you know, she gave up all of these things for me. I understand that the measure of how much I love another person is how much of my own joy and fulfillment I am willing to give up for them. The measure of how much I love a person is how much of my pleasure I am willing to give up for them. And so we keep on sacrificing as a way of showing that we love other people, and we just kind of end up dry, you know, just like a piece of toast with no butter, dry, with no pleasure, and feeling guilty about even asking for just one smear of butter to come across us. I see Kay's hand is up. I don't know if it's from before though.
Yeah, it's up. Yes, no, my hand was up. I wanted to maybe engage this idea of self-sacrifice. I know that as a child, I was the eldest and I cared for my siblings. That allowed me to mature quickly. Looking back, I don't see it as some grave sacrifice that I made. I think what we often look at is sacrifice or choices that individuals make. When it comes to life, you cannot enjoy everything. Quite often, you have to make decisions about what you value and decide to pursue what you find most fulfilling. If you are a woman and you've decided that motherhood and being a mother is what is most fulfilling in your life, if that was a conscious decision that you made, and this is what you pursuing, many women who make those choices are enjoyments. They might appear self-sacrificing. And if a person feels like it's a sacrifice, that they're giving much more than they ever imagined, and it's not fulfilling, that's one thing. But one should not assume that they are not getting pleasure out of those choices they make. Or it could be the other way around. You didn't have any children. Oh my goodness. that your life must be really, truly unfulfilling because you didn't make those choices. I think people make a variety of choices. I've always made choices that was fulfilling for me. I don't feel as if I've made any major sacrifices in my life. And with sacrifices I have made, those are sacrifices I enjoyed making. So this question of sacrifice is complex. And enjoyment is complex. There are people who may get a lot more pleasure from giving than receiving. And that is not because they've somehow been trained, but because that pleasure is genuine pleasure. Yeah? And it can take various forms. And so I think I don't want women especially to fall into the trap of thinking that we are self-sacrificing and that we aren't getting pleasure out of the choices that we often make. Now, there are times when you don't make choices and you don't feel as if you had a choice. And that's when I think it becomes problematic, when it's not your choice.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's complex, and there will be multiple things that a person will get out of an act. So even giving up something for the sake of your child can bring pleasure because there's another thing that you're looking to get. I think that there are a lot of women who, because of what they've been taught about motherhood, don't understand that there is any other way to be, you know? So it's not that there's an absolute limit situation that causes them to feel I have no other option but to give up this thing for my child. But we make mothers feel bad if they don't sacrifice for their child. If a woman should come and say, I am a mother and there is something that my child needs or wants and something that I need or want. Actually, let's put it want versus want. There is something I want and there's something my child wants, and I'm going to get the thing I want over the thing that my child wants. There's so much shame that we kind of want women to have around that, and there's a way that we're like, oh, you're selfish and you're a bad mother and stuff like that. And I think that women carry that inside of them. And I think it extends even outside of the mother-child relationship. I think there's so many of us who grow up and then you come to a place where you realize, actually, I could have done without some of the things that I had. It probably would have been okay if my mother did do some of the things that she wanted to do for herself, but she didn't see where there was another way. And then you start to see the pattern in your own life where you treat yourself that way. I take it down to this, the big piece of chicken. When I am serving food, I have been trained. You give the best food to other people. You give them the biggest piece of chicken, whatever is nicest on the plate, you give it to them. And I don't really mind per se, but sometimes I wonder, like, would the world cease to spin if I got the nicest thing on the plate? Like, would it cease to spin if I decided I was going to eat the biggest piece of chicken? Would it cease to spin if I served myself first? And it's these little things that they can be mundane or they're just a normal part of your life. But when you look at them, there's this pattern of deriving pleasure from service as opposed to deriving pleasure from giving to self. And I think that there is space for us to think a little bit more about how do I get pleasure from what I give to myself versus the pleasure I get from enjoying giving to others? Because some of us really want to give to ourselves, As my feeling on it.
That's this seems to be a very common theme, common thread. Lots of interesting comments. Jennifer says, I think especially in a Christian nation like the Bahamas, women more than men are expected to give sacrificial love.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a whole theory there, sacrificial love. Simone
Yeah.
says, I agree that self-sacrifice is learned from our mothers and caregivers. How do you unlearn the self-denial of pleasure? And I think asking, is it through self-care?
Yeah, I think a part of it is through self-care. I think another part of it is actually through um like some amount of like cognitive behavioral therapy. It's really about what is the self-talk that comes up when I choose to engage in something pleasurable. What is the self-talk that comes up when I choose to stop sacrificing? What is the self-talk that comes up when I choose to give something to myself? And how am I going to lovingly engage what's coming up and put it in another direction? Because if we're honest with ourselves, some of us are afraid to take our self-care beyond a mud mask because it feels too indulgent. We're afraid to take our self-care to the point where, well, this friend is actually sucking the life out of me and I need to cut them off because it feels selfish. We're afraid to take our self-care to the point of, I actually cannot loan you any money because I have loaned you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars over time and you have not paid any back. I don't see you moving to any type of financial stability and I'm about to be broke. So no, we're afraid to move out of the levels of self-care that are just about, how can I kind of pamper my body? Because the voices come up that tell you that you're being selfish and tell you that you're not looking out for your community and tell you that you feel like you're better than people and you get rich and switch and you're becoming one of those people who is just so caught up with themselves they can't see anybody else. And so what is the thing that you say to yourself when that comes up? Because I think having a deliberate practice of addressing negative self-talk, having a deliberate practice of retraining your brain to not associate pleasure with guilt is also self-care. Like it's deep psychological self-care to break that bond between pleasure and guilt that a lot of us exist with almost by default. I think it's retraining ourselves to be comfortable receiving.
Yeah, I think for some people, there has to be some rationale, some reason that it's important outside of self, which is just drilling down more into the whole "I don't deserve it" thing. Like there's a lot of conversation around rest, right? And that rest is productive, which it is. When we use that as a reason for people to rest, we're still playing into the idea that everything that you do has to be in service to production, to the economy, to capitalism. So it gets really tricky when you try to rationalize these things for yourself. And then there's another interesting comment from Teles: choosing to be child-free versus being childless. The accusations that people who are child-free are selfish, is that connected to pleasure or the denial of pleasure?
I'd love to hear more about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear Celeste say more about that, because there is a lot that comes up there.
Yeah, there's actually Carla did an Instagram live. I think it was 3 conversations about people who don't have children, some by choice and some not, and it was a really, really interesting set of conversations.
Yay!
Instagram.
Yay!
Yeah, but I've never thought about it that way. That that judgment is that judgment coming from a place of jealousy around not having access to pleasure, or the perception that you don't have access to pleasure because you have a child, and so this person who doesn't have a child is selfish.
I think there's definitely in it. There's a way that we love to pass on struggle to people. And you can see it with employers and when younger people come in and they're like, I think that my workplace should be healthy and emotionally balanced. And employers are like, when I was starting out with work, anybody could say anything they wanted to do to me, and I had to work 55 hours a day and they didn't pay me. And I did 5-year internships for free, and you're going to do it too because it's going to build character. And they're offended that you should think that you should have something better than them. And I think there's a way that for some people who have children, when they see a person who is child free, you just look like you have too much time. You look like your money is not being split in 5 directions. And there is a very complicated emotion that can come up inside of that. And I mean, people are capable of feeling multiple things at once. They can be happy that, they love their kid and all of that type of stuff. But the ways that their life is not like yours, I think it can bother them in some ways. I think we all struggle with that to some degree. Even if we have the things that we want, we can want multiple things at the same time. And so the thing that we don't have, we go ahead and we feel some type of way about that. Try to bring up a couple of things that I had wanted us to try bring up my notes. At my age, you have to have notes. Can't trust your brain to do it for you. Cannot trust your memory. At my age, you see, you can't trust your memory at my age. The pleasure and the body. There was another thing that I had wanted us to talk about a little bit. No, there's somebody.
Hi, how you doing? Good night. Hi, I'm Monique, and I wanted to say something along the lines of self-care. I thought that was a very important point because I had, before I had in the past, I had problems with actually saying no because I was a people pleaser. So when it came down to saying no, I had to learn how to say no was the most, and I mean, it was so pleasurable. Like where I never said no before, I always used to accommodate people and just being able to please everybody. And sometimes it made you not feeling pleased because you're pleasing everybody else. And I came to this place in my life where I had to say no. I'm not able to do that. I'm so sorry. I'm not able to do that without making excuses for saying no. And it made me feel so empowered. Like it made me feel so good. Like I was just beating up myself and saying yes all the time when I really could have said, no, I really can't do it today. Or really, I just can't do it this year or something like that, So I kind of like that. That's self-care. Like most people just can't say no. And then when you listen to them and they're talking to you and they say, I'm just tired of this. Everybody's just on me. And, just say no. Just say you're not able to do it this time. It's really an unhealthy place to be. And I'm just so happy I'm over that. And I'm able to say, I'm not able to do that. I'm so sorry. I love you, but I'm not able to do it, maybe next time. So that I really love.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I feel like learning how to say no is a deep, 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 deep type of self-care. Being comfortable enough to just offer it. And even if you feel a way about it, to endure those feelings so you can get to it. Because if we're always spending our time doing things for other people, a lot of times we just don't have time for pleasure. You don't have time to do anything that you're enjoying because all of your day is tapped out in meeting other people's needs. And it feels selfish sometimes at first. But when you think of it, it's like, why should you spend all of your life's time doing things that you think you should do, things that you're also low-key resentful of doing, or things that I don't hate, but I don't particularly love, with no dedicated time to doing things that bring you pleasure? Why wouldn't you have time in your life that's specifically for that? And no is going to create the space for that. Most of us are tapped out. We're going to have to offer some firm no's to make the space for pleasure in our lives because we've given our time away to other people. We feel bad about saving our time for ourselves. I know I did.
There's a great quote from Adrienne Marie Brown that we posted on Instagram this week around that same thing. I just put it in the chat. Yeah. Your no makes the way for your yes. Boundaries create the container within which your yes is authentic. Being able to say no makes yes a choice.
Yeah.
Good one. It's
yeah.
a good quote.
Yeah. It's a great quote. And I mean, that sounds like consent, right? If we say that consent is an enthusiastic yes, many of us are not actually consenting to the things we're saying yes to. We're like, yeah, I'll go along with it, but I don't really want, there's no enthusiasm. You are violating your own boundaries. Yourself did not consent to this. Yourself is going along with it because you're forcing yourself to. And why would you do that to yourself? You wouldn't do it to somebody else. You know? There's
not really related to pleasure, but just like to the comment about being child free. That's something that I've thought about recently as like 20 something with children. I found that like last year when the pandemic first started, I was working in Toronto and my supervisor made a comment to the effect of like, well, I have a child, I really don't want to catch this. And he was like, you'll be okay, you know, you don't have a child, you're of a certain age and blah, blah, blah. I'm not trying to catch COVID, regardless of having a child, regardless of living with someone or not. Like, why is that? And I find that sometimes, I don't know if it's just newer parents or parents in general, somehow think that people without children don't have other responsibilities. Like, for me in particular, being in Toronto as an immigrant, I don't have no family here. No, I'm not trying to catch COVID. Like, you know what I mean? And even something as simple as like, oh yeah, I might not have a child, but maybe I'm caring for an elderly parent, or maybe I'm caring for a friend, or maybe I'm like, there's just this assumption that if you don't have a child, you don't have the same kind of responsibilities. And I feel like that really gets in the way of understanding and appreciating the ways in which like we deny ourselves pleasure. So I just wanted to throw that in there because I'm not trying to catch COVID. So don't even dare suggest that I could be okay to catch COVID.
Because you only staying alive for you. You are only staying alive for you. So right? The need for you to stay alive is less.
Me and my one body?
Just you one so. No man, not that important. Just you. Right. No, you could go.
Right. I could go and be ball up in the corner coughing and no. No.
Oh, child. People wild. But like, it's the same thing. If you not doing something for somebody else, then you not doing it. You know where I see this? American Idol, Top Chef, Chopped. Everybody come, they're doing it for the auntie, they're doing it for their mother, they're doing it for the prep school teacher, they're doing it for the dog down the road. Everybody come into the competition for somebody else. I would like to see the person who come up and say, well, actually, I would like a shot at stardom because that would bring me great joy to be a star. No, everybody come to tell you about how one time there was an old lady that lived down the road from them and she loved to sing. I'm like, you are not here because of this old lady. You are here because you want money. You want a record deal. It's okay. But like, if you're not doing something for other people, if it's not service, you're wrong for enjoy it. If I don't take on yourself and go sit down somewhere wishing COVID upon me because I'm single, get out of here. Move along. Move along. Bright. Not doing it.
There's this interesting thing in this isn't really self-sacrifice, but I guess connecting it to that idea that sometimes giving and doing things for people is pleasure. some of us
Mhm.
have difficulty when that is someone else's pleasure to do for other people, and have
Yes.
trouble accepting
Yes.
that and taking pleasure in the fact that somebody else thought they would just make me dinner tonight and I wouldn't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
And I've learned from people in my life to, like, you know, be grateful and not just say thank you, but be able to like tangibly show your appreciation. And
Yeah.
it's so ingrained in me that I find myself over the last few weeks, I've just been like, what am I doing? There's a person who makes candles, and I buy candles from her regularly.
Yeah.
And the other day she messaged to say she was outside with the candles and see me looking around the house like, oh God, the woman came to bring the candles. I don't have anything to give her. I'm paying her, you know. Paying her, but I'm looking around like, do I snack? I didn't bake any cookies. And very disappointed going outside to pay the woman for the candles. And I came back inside and was like, wait. Wait a second. The same thing happens when my friend with an agribusiness comes to bring me the produce every week and I pay her. I'm looking around the house. What Erin might like? Erin doesn't want anything. She doesn't want anything. But it's I don't know, it's partly like wanting to share things with people, but also like that discomfort with receiving something and not being able to give something back, even when it's a fair exchange.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then it comes back to, it's like, I need to tip the scales, so I'm the giver. You know, I don't want to be even because that might slip over into me receiving territory. And again, who am I to receive? This is deeply uncomfortable. It implies that I don't want to need. I have no needs. I'm impervious to needs. You know? We're complicated. There's 2 comments that came in earlier back to back, and there was a link between them. So it was talking about what does healing mean, like the idea of a body that has healed, what does that mean? And then the idea of like, how do you find pleasure in yourself? So I'm talking about self-image and the link to self-esteem. And the thing that came to my mind was actually, and I think it's relevant for me because I have been on this healing journey for several years. And it's gotten to a point where I'm starting to feel like some of my healing journey is a lie, because I'm not actually trying to heal. I'm trying to be a perfect person, right? So I claim I'm on a healing journey, but I'm really just waiting around for a perfect version of myself to show up that like offends no one and absolutely has it together all the time. And so the question that came to my mind when I was listening to those comments are, what are your expectations of what a healed version of yourself will look like? And how does that impact? And how does that impact your ability to take pleasure in yourself as you are? You know? Because we have these ideas of what we will look like when we've healed from all of our traumas, and what we will look like when we're further along on our spiritual journey, and when we're loving ourselves more, and all of these types of things. And I think it's beautiful to hold space for your own expansion, but it can get to a point where we're so focused on this healing that we can't show up to who we are. And I think that definitely is going to impact our capacity for pleasure. If I'm always busy critiquing myself and telling myself that, oh, I should react better to that, I should be calmer, I should be more allowing of other people, I shouldn't argue, I should be, I don't know, more peaceful. At what point do I just get to enjoy the person I am? You know? And so I think for me, one of the big questions I have to ask myself is, am I living in the present of who I am? Am I actually showing up to who I am? Am I able to receive pleasure as I am? Am I able to believe that I am deserving of pleasure as I am? Because there's a way I can put off pleasure until there's a version of me that deserves it. And there's no version of me that is going to deserve pleasure more than the version of me that's here. is lies and deception. It's not that.
Well, that's disappointing.
The double-edged sword of it. The
Yeah.
double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're getting down to our final minutes. Is anyone have burning questions or comments or ideas? Anybody want to share ways that you found pleasure recently? I think that would be helpful actually to hear how people are creating pleasure for themselves these days. Or read it in the chat if you don't want us to hear it from you.
I think just to touch on what Carla was saying about, I used to be that person very much. So, like I am waiting for this version of myself, perhaps, that is comfortable wearing, I don't know, like a tube top or something. Like I used to be pretty insecure about my arms at one point because like I started gaining a lot of muscle. Like the more I started to do for myself, like obviously like the more toned like my upper body and my upper extremities got. And I remember dating a guy, like not seriously, but enough for his opinion to matter. Let's just say that, right? And like he made me like really insecure during the time that we had that thing about my shoulders. And I remember I bought this dress like 2015, literally did not wear this dress until last year. Yo, what is that? What is that about? Like, so I feel like, I have definitely been like, you know what, like, so I'm part of it is obviously like, that had ended for a while. And so it's like Carla said, like kind of just giving yourself permission to say, you know what, fuck that. Like, I love the way that I look now. Like, I don't need to wait for someone to come and say, oh, you look so sexy. Like, look all the sexiness. Like, I know it,
Yes, you know it, and you let them know that you know it. Love it. Teles?
Yeah, for me, I love to eat so much. And what has been giving me pleasure or how I've been allowing myself to have like pleasure with food is just like immediately rejecting anyone's comments about like what I'm eating, why I'm eating, when I'm eating, and just allowing myself to just like enjoy food and not internalize like anyone else's like food insecurities or any like projections that they might have about like how they feel about their body or how they feel about their eating habits, and just allowing myself to eat because I'm hungry or I just feel like eating, just like allowing myself to eat and enjoy food.
I love it. I love it. Only in recent years, I started paying attention to the way that I eat and like slowing it down to actually enjoy the food and not just like, sometimes you eat mindlessly. You're at work, you're doing things, and you don't even know when all the food is gone. But there's something different about when you're actually focusing on the experience of eating and like actually tasting the food. We have another comment. Z says, pleasure for me these days looks a lot like setting boundaries, both in my personal and professional life, so that I can make space to engage more with the people and experience that bring me pleasure, that sparks joy. So that means I clock out at exactly 5, no matter what, and I come home, unplug, and spend time with my family or write. That I recently started again for pleasure with no intention of monetizing it. Love it. Love it. 5 o'clock. Deuces. Move on to the next thing, and something that's enjoyable for the sake of just enjoying it. You muted, Carla.
I'm just like, yeah. I love that. I love that no matter what, I clock out at 5, no matter what, because the no matter what is the line. Let me just send this last set of emails. There's this one document. And next thing you know, it's 7:30, it's 8 o'clock, and you're still there. And so it's like you have to get firm with yourself. The boundary setting has to be with you. You have to look at you and be like, why are you still here? It's 5:15. You shouldn't be here. You have to leave now, because that's what you said you were going to do. Because if you can't maintain a boundary with yourself, how are you going to maintain it with other people? If you're real shaky bakey with you, you'll be shaky bakey with other people too, you know? And I love that because, yeah, boundary setting is pleasurable in itself, and then it multiplies pleasure when it starts to give you the thing that you want in your life. You know, the thing that you set the boundary looking for. When you get it, it feels nice. Love that. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing for pleasure recently.
In our last few minutes, so Carla, if you want to check your notes for your other things, I'm gonna stage a distraction so no one will notice. Lauren is taking care of our prize drawing today. So if you've been following us on social media, you know that we have a bunch of KG Beauty vouchers. We have Body Polish or Yoni Steam by The Last Island Gal. We have lunch at Ty's Place. We have a 90-minute massage by Relax and Escape Spa. Somebody else tell me the things that I'm not saying. Infused salts by Seasonal Sunshine Bahamas. And go on, Lauren.
Is it Muddo?
Muddo Baked Goods by Muddo. Yeah, that's where I've been getting my bread every week. It's so good. It's baked to order, micro bakery. There's something about bread coming to your door and it's warm. So yeah, lots of great prizes for people who register and show up and participate in the conversations. So Lauren, you did the drawing. You want to announce the winners. Tonight we're doing two $10 vouchers to KG Beauty.
Yes, and the winners are Mo and Ternille.
Woo! So Lauren is going to inbox or direct message y'all. You're welcome. So KG Beauty is cool. You can find them on Instagram at Shop KG Beauty. They have lip stains and brow pomade and lashes. She makes lip scrubs, different flavors, scents, colors. So yeah, the prices are pretty good. You can actually get something with the $10. Like you don't have to put 20 with it to get something. So look in your messages in the chat, Ternille and Mo, to get details on how to redeem that. And back to you, Carla. Any wrap up, any things for people to think about as we move throughout the rest of the week into time for Planet Pleasure on Saturday?
Yeah. I think the last thing I would say is, well, I mean, just to say thanks to everybody, because there's so much that came out tonight that I'd never thought about before. So this has been a really good space for me. It's been my pleasure, my actual pleasure, not in like I'm directing at the hotel way. And I think the thing that I would close with is a lot of the conversations that we're having today or nowadays are about manifestation. You know, we're trying to manifest healthy relationships, and we're trying to manifest a bag that's secured and flourishing edges and all of those types of things. And I would just love for us to remember that manifestation work is actually pleasure work. You know, because if you think about the term manifest, to make something manifest is to put it in such a way that it can be easily perceived by your senses, is to make it sensual, not necessarily sexual, but to make it sensual. And so manifestation work is about allowing yourself to experience the pleasure of something as though it's there before it's even there. And so if we are serious about manifesting these better lives for ourselves, then it behooves us to figure out how to become comfortable in pleasure. You know, pleasure can feel very unsafe for some of us who have issues with losing control, those of us who may have experienced trauma, those of us who may have received complicated messaging about enjoyment and what joy means. But all of that can be shifted if you choose to do the work to shift it. So choose to do the work to shift it, because you deserve pleasure. There's no one set of people there that deserve pleasure. There's no one set of people that don't deserve pleasure. And pleasure is not going to, cause you to become completely unhinged and undone and lose yourself. And even if you do, maybe there's a version of yourself that is okay for you to lose. So ask yourself, what do I enjoy? What do I enjoy about myself? What do I enjoy about my work? What are the things that bring me pleasure, even if they don't make sense to anybody else? And how can I create a life where more and more and more of the things that I do, I'm focusing about what is pleasurable about them. And so I can have more pleasure in my life, even if I don't make significant changes to the types of things I do in my day. Yeah, I think that's the last thing that I want to say. It's a manifestation work, is pleasure work. So enjoy yourself, enjoy your life, and enjoy being yourself as much as you possibly can.
Awesome. Lauren or Nia, can y'all give some information on International Women's Day Expo? I'm trying to type in the chat some details.
Hey y'all.
Nia, I think you unmuted and then went mute again.
Oh wow, my bad. Sorry, everybody. Okay. So yeah, on Saturday, just to give you a rollout of the events. So we'll be starting at 10 a.m. with Pleasure Poetics. 11 a.m. we'll have a theater session. At noon, we'll have On the Mend. I think that is to do with sewing. 1 p.m. we have gardening, and then also art. So we'll have 2 sessions then. At 2 p.m., we'll be doing contemporary movement, which is dance. And at 3 p.m., we have yoga. So we have a variety of events, and we're super excited to have you all join us, and just, come in, get some pleasure from these different experiences that we have lined up for you all.
Yeah, we hope to see you there. You can come spend the whole 6 hours with us. You can drop in, drop out, come back again. There will be more prizes being given away. Also the march. So we usually have the march on the Saturday, and we arrive at the Dundas and the expo is there. We're splitting it this year. So the expo is on Saturday, all virtual, and the march is on Monday. Actual International Women's Day, March 8th, virtual. And all you have to do is post a sign on social media with the hashtag IWD for International Women's Day 242. Hashtag IWD 242. Post your sign. You can scroll something on a piece of paper, take a picture of it. You could use one of the templates that we posted. The templates are on our Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. The handle on all of them is Equality 242. And the more you participate in these events, the more events you show up to, the more events you register for. Your posts on social media all get you an additional entry to win the prizes, which include, like I said earlier, a 90-minute massage by Relax and Escape Spa. And those are on a lovely deck overlooking Cabbage Beach. More vouchers from KG Beauty for beauty products, baked goods by Muddo, lunch at Ty's Place, infused salts by Seasonal Sunshine Bahamas, body polish or yoni steam by The Last Island Gal. And I'm probably missing something. Jewelry by Katrina Lucas. Katrina Creates on Instagram. So we're looking forward to seeing you at these events and posting on social media. Another way to get entries is to post about your pleasure. You can post a picture of yourself riding a bicycle, a picture of a good plate of food. Just use the hashtag pleasuretings. Type it in the chat. And you get more entries to win the prizes. And people are kind of popping up and offering more prizes every day. So you never know what's going to happen next at Equality Bahamas. Thanks for joining us, Carla. Thank you for being with us. Again, you know, we got to bring you like 2-3 times a year because the people keep demanding more talk. Thanks to the whole volunteer team for helping to make all of these events possible. I think that is a wrap. We have a pleasure time playlist by DJ Ampero. To get the playlist, you have to be registered for events. So all of you will get the playlist by email before it goes live to the locals, you know, the regulars. Other than that, that's it. Have a good night. We will see you hopefully on Saturday.
Bye. Thanks for having me.